I've got a wholesale deal. Let's call it a zombie deal because I thought the deal was finished, but no, 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 no. It came back 2 years later and ate my brain.
Seriously?
Yes,
It was like it came back from the dead and it tried to eat you?
it tried to eat my brain. So we'll rewind to 2017. So this is the early days of Key Glee, guys. Brand new company. I believe we were still working out of Josiah's living room at the time. And I had a fourplex that I had held since 2010. So for anybody that remembers, in 2008, we had a real estate crash. And in 2010, you could buy incredible deals at prices I have never seen and will never see again. I picked up a fourplex in a neighborhood in Phoenix, Arizona that some could call a little spooky, called Sunny Slope. Ironic name, actually. More slopey than it is sunny. So I have this fourplex, and it's in a pretty interesting part of town. I'll use that word. And the biggest issue was our tenants were colorful, very, very interested in narcotics and other types of business ventures of the flesh. We can just call it that. All kinds of fun things happening in this building. Now, this is the state I picked the building up in. And so, of course, our goal upon acquiring the property was to have it turned around. So we spent the next few months trying to evict people from the building for illegal activities and all kinds of craziness. We end up being able to get everybody out, and then we conduct extensive renovations. So we make the property great. We change the flooring, we paint every unit, we put in new kitchens, countertops, you name it, brand new roof. The building was fantastic. Our goal was to hold this fourplex for decades. It was going to be one that hopefully we would have been able to give to our kids and just create a cash flow situation for years and years to come. What ends up happening is we hire a building manager, and the building manager on the surface seemed to be a very nice guy. He knew the neighborhood very well. He had actually lived in the area for quite some time and claimed to know who the bad apples were and who some of the just working class people that would be great tenants would be. And so it starts. We get the building full pretty quickly, and it, for the first part, seemed to be pretty standard. However, it just every couple of months, the tenants would stop paying, and then would begin a really lengthy process of trying to either get the rent or serve them with notices so that we could begin the eviction process. And it was just constant. It was almost like every other month was having these same issues, like clockwork. So lo and behold, we talk to our building manager and we ask if there's any way that he might be able to help us in really securing the place and finding tenants that wouldn't, mess around and cause us problems. Well, it just so turns out the building manager was the problem, right? And so he was actually cutting deals with the tenants and basically running a scam where he would keep some of the rent, pay some of the rent, keep some of the rent, pay some of the rent, to the degree where he strung us along for nearly a year in the building and probably collected 50% of the rents from our tenants. After we come to find out what had happened, actually, one of the tenants that lived there reached out to us personally. And how that even happened was I had gone to visit the property, and I had been approached by a tenant who asked if they could take my phone number because they wanted to share some things that they didn't feel comfortable talking about while I was on site. Of course, I gave them my number, and then I was let in on the scam. And so now we have to get rid of this building manager who is not wanting to leave. And so we have another lengthy process of evicting the building manager, who then decides that he wants to destroy the property on his way out. Because we had spent a significant amount of money in this property, the damage that the building manager ended up doing to the property was significant. He took a completely turnkey fourplex and demolished it practically to a point where it was no longer a retail fourplex, and we had to just wholesale it. So that's what we did. We were tired landlords, professional real estate investors who became tired landlords. And so what we did is we ended up putting it out on our wholesale list, and we found a buyer. This video is brought to you by PCS. Do yourself a favor and make sure you have proper corporate structure. Click the link in the description to make sure that you're not just a person, you're a business. Now stop watching me and go watch me. Now, for anybody who's ever bought a wholesale deal, you will see the wholesale contract will typically have some fairly robust disclosures and some fairly robust language in it that will provide a seller some protection from disclosures and some protection from any deficiencies or problems that might be inherent in the property. Again, guys, when we're wholesaling, we know that the properties that we tend to sell aren't the greatest condition. They're not the nicest properties, right? And so having disclosures in your contracts are really important, but also having language in there that absolves you from any liability is also really important to have. So this language is all in our contract, so we feel really good. And we end up wholesaling the property to some new real estate investors. Now, we ended up doing a great walkthrough with the future buyers and pointed out all of the problems that had happened there. We talked to them about the tenant situation. We talked to them about the rampant drug use. We talked to them about the body house that was being run out from one of the units. It was a mess. We also explained that we had completed significant renovations, and although a lot of the walls had holes in them and some of the flooring had been ripped out and some of the kitchens had been destroyed, the building had great bones. Electrically and plumbing wise, everything had been replaced. So we felt really good that with some cosmetic work and a new manager, a future buyer would actually be able to create a great opportunity for themselves. So we sell it, and we think we're completely in the clear. 2 years later, I get served a notice, and we are being sued by the buyers of the building for a significant amount of money. The claim was that we sold them a problem property, that we had not disclosed to them the issues that were causing us to sell. Also, that the amount that they ended up having to spend in renovations was significantly more than they had anticipated, and that we should have known that there was going to be overages just because of the neighborhood. A lot of their material got stolen during the renovation. People would break in and destroy the property. It was a mess. And we ended up actually having to go to arbitration. Now, for anybody who's ever been sued in a real estate transaction, they can become nightmares. First and foremost, it doesn't matter who's right. And this is what I learned when I went to arbitration. Even though our contract had some extremely protective language in it that had the onus of all of the inspections on the buyer. Basically, they were buying a property without any warranty, without any representation, without any issue, without any promises of condition. We never give renovation estimates on our deals. That's for a buyer to find out. And so even though our contract was really, really, really strong, it doesn't stop somebody from suing you. Now, here's the kicker. Because this was the early part of our careers, my sister and I had bought the property in our personal names. So we did not go to PCS and start an LLC yet. We hadn't started an LLC, so we had bought this property in our personal names. And so we were being sued personally. Now, in the time that we had held the property, my sister and I had gained some significant amount of wealth. And now we actually had a lot to lose, especially in our personal names, from accounts with cash in it to our personal residences to other investments that we held. We were really in a bad place. So the first thing I want to say to you guys, if you are wholesaling and you are not wholesaling in an LLC, shame on you. Shame on you for not creating protection for you and your family. It is a bad idea to wholesale in your personal name. You absolutely want to have an LLC set up in whatever state you're working in so that you can protect yourself from personal liability should you ever get sued. So our first mistake was owning the building in our personal names. Now, we end up going to arbitration and we point out to the judge, and it's a judge who actually does the arbitration with you, the language that was in the contract. And the language was very clear, and it stated that the buyer needed to conduct all physical inspections and that no representations, no warranties, nothing was being offered to the buyer. Interestingly enough, even though the judge had said that the language was in our favor, it did not stop them from being able to file the lawsuit. And because we were in arbitration, we were heavily pressured by the judge to settle. Even though we were in the right, we were heavily pressured in arbitration to settle. Now, I want you guys to understand what happens when you don't settle. When you don't settle in arbitration, you end up going to trial. And after speaking with our attorney and asking how much a trial would cost, the minimum amount a lawyer will charge for a trial is $50,000 just to defend you, even though we were 100% in the right. So again, if you are not wholesaling in an LLC, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble. Now, if we had held this in an LLC, and if that LLC didn't have a lot to lose, we really could have just walked away. We probably wouldn't have even needed to answer or reply to the service. But we're sitting there really exposed at this point, right? Because we know we're in the right, but we know in order to defend ourselves, we're going to have to spend $50,000. We have a judge explaining to us that even if we're successful in winning a trial, very rarely will a judge award you costs. Now, you'll hear very often attorneys try to pressure their client to going into trial. And they'll often gas you up and tell you that you are very, very, very in the right, that they can win the case, and that they will go after the other side for attorney's costs. Guys, that is not the case. Our judge very clearly explained to us that there was a low likelihood that even if we were successful in defending ourselves at trial, which he believed we would be, we would still end up eating the cost of the attorney's fees, which would have been $50,000. Now, we sold the building for $100K. So I just want you guys to understand just what this all looked like, right? We sell the building for $100K. We're being sued for $80,000. And our judge is telling us that it's going to cost us $50,000 to defend ourselves. Our attorney, on the other hand, is gassing us up, telling us that this judge doesn't know what they're talking about, that we should absolutely defend ourselves and go to trial, that yes, it will cost $50,000, but she was really confident that we would win, and she was really confident that we would be awarded costs as well. And so we're being pulled in every different direction in this meeting, in this arbitration. This arbitration goes on for 2 days. 2 days of our lives, guys. And we have to appear. We actually have to appear. You can't not go to arbitration. So sitting in this after day 2, we end up deciding that we are going to settle. Now, this is where it gets really tricky because you are settling now. They know they are going to walk away with some money. And this is where greed kicks in. Because, of course, you've got attorneys who are going to take a portion of the settlement on the plaintiff side. You've got our attorney who is being billed, who's billing us by the hour for this, right? So they're about $500 an hour. We're now at 2 days, 6 hours a day. So it's already costing us thousands of dollars just to be sitting in this chair. Incredible, incredible. Nonetheless, what ends up happening is we settle for $20,000. Now, here's the kicker, guys. There was another wholesaler involved that brought the buyer. Another wholesaler got involved and ended up bringing us the buyer. That wholesaler completely disappeared from the conversation. They were nowhere to be found. And so everything landed on our shoulders. So not only did we end up having to pay the $20,000 to the plaintiff for what really was an unfair lawsuit, another $6,000 in legal fees, and we ended up having to pay it. So guys, this is part of the business. Is there anything that we could have done differently? Yes. The first thing that we could have done is we could have had an LLC. If we had held that property in an LLC, our exposure level would have been a much less, and we would have been able to negotiate a lot more ruthlessly in the arbitration. I would never have written that $20,000 check if we were in an LLC that only held that one property, because if we were in an LLC that only held that one property, that LLC would have very likely not had a lot of assets. So there wouldn't have been a lot for us to lose. And so we could have taken a completely different stance in that arbitration if we didn't have so much to lose. So what's the lesson here, guys? You can absolutely get sued in any deal. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Nothing can stop somebody from suing you. If somebody wants to sue you, you will pay. You will pay. That's just what it is. Have an LLC. Guys, do not do business in your personal names. It's dangerous. Have an LLC. And secondly, make sure that you're vetting your buyer for their sophistication. We knew when we walked the property that this was a first-time buyer. They really didn't know what they were doing. It was the first time that they were buying an investment property. And truly, I had so much interest in that fourplex. I could have sold that thing to 5 other buyers who were way more sophisticated than this first-time buyer. But for whatever reason, this first-time buyer ended up getting the deal, and it was a nightmare. Also, the second piece, if you're JVing with people, make sure you're JVing with people that you can tell will not run away and stand toe-to-toe with you if anything goes down. This is the reason why working with a company like Keegley is an incredible asset to you, because should you ever find yourself in legal trouble, we will absolutely be there to defend the situation. We will always do the right thing. So these are the things that we could have done differently. This is how we could have done things better. But honestly, Pace, the learning experience was phenomenal. I learned about the legal system. I absolutely paid, but I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how to protect myself. I learned about disclosures. I learned more about the language of contracts. And I also learned that if anybody sues you, get ready to write a check. Thanks for watching another one of my YouTube videos. Now it's your turn to go out and take some action. But before you do, like and subscribe to my channel, because the law of reciprocity means you owe me, bitch.